August 16th, 1940, 11:37 a.m. English Channel, 14 miles southeast of Dover. The water temperature was 58 degrees Fahrenheit, cold enough to kill a man in 4 hours. Pilot Officer William Fisk never saw the 20-millimeter rounds that tore through his Hurricane's fuel tank. One moment, he was diving on a formation of Junkers 88 bombers. The next, his cockpit was filling with smoke and the stench of burning aviation fuel. His engine was dying, flames licking back from the cowling. He had perhaps 30 seconds before the aircraft became a flying coffin. Below him, the English Channel looked like hammered pewter under the August sun. Between the waves, small, dark shapes dotted the water. Fishing boats, dozens of them, their nets deployed, working the rich grounds where the channel met the North Sea. Fisk didn't know their names, didn't know that the nearest vessel was the trawler Lord Southborough out of Margate, skippered by a 47-year-old fisherman named Tom Bennett, who had been catching plaice and sole in these waters for 30 years. Didn't know that Bennett and his 5-man crew were about to become his only chance at survival. What the young American pilot also didn't know, what none of the RAF commanders understood in those desperate summer months of 1940, was that these ordinary fishermen, these men who knew nothing of aerial combat or military tactics, would become one of the most effective rescue services in the entire war. Before specialized air-sea rescue units existed, before high-speed launches and amphibious aircraft, there were the fishermen, men who pulled drowning pilots from the icy water with the same efficiency they hauled in their catches, men who faced German fighters and bombers with nothing but rifles and Lewis guns, men who operated under the radar of German intelligence, saving lives the Third Reich assumed were already lost. When war broke out in September 1939, British military planners had prepared for nearly every contingency except one. They had never seriously considered that the primary theater of air operations would be directly over water. The assumption had been that RAF squadrons would operate from bases in France, with the English Channel serving as a distant rear area. Fighter pilots would fight over land. If they were shot down, they would bail out over fields and forests, where the Home Guard or local police could retrieve them. The fall of France in June 1940 obliterated those assumptions in a matter of weeks. Suddenly, RAF fighters were scrambling from bases in southern England to intercept German formations over the Channel itself. The Luftwaffe's forward bases in occupied France put them just minutes from Dover. Air battles that would once have taken place over the green fields of Belgium now erupted over cold gray water. And British pilots, the most valuable military asset the nation possessed, began dropping into the sea at an alarming rate. The statistics were catastrophic. Between July 10th and October 31st, 1940, during what would become known as the Battle of Britain, RAF Fighter Command lost 537 aircrew. Of that number, 215 were killed or went missing after ditching in the English Channel or North Sea. Not shot down over land where they might survive, not captured where they might eventually be exchanged, simply gone, swallowed by water that gave no second chances. In August 1940, the survival rate for RAF pilots who went down over water was approximately 20%. 4 out of every 5 men who hit the Channel never made it home. For every pilot who made it back to his squadron, 4 died in the water or were never found. Britain was losing experienced combat pilots faster than the training schools could replace them. Not to German guns, to the sea itself. Air Chief Marshal Hugh Dowding, commanding RAF Fighter Command, knew the math was unsustainable. Each pilot represented over 400 hours of flight training, months of tactical instruction, and irreplaceable combat experience. Early war pilots who had fought over France brought knowledge of German tactics that couldn't be taught in classrooms. Losing them to drowning or exposure was like burning the nation's most valuable library, one book at a time. But in the summer of 1940, Britain had no organized air-sea rescue service. The concept barely existed. Fighter pilots were equipped with Mae West life jackets, but these offered minimal protection in cold water. The jackets were initially dyed green, making pilots nearly invisible against the sea. No dinghies, no survival kits, no flares or signal mirrors, just a life jacket and hope that someone would see them before hypothermia set in. The responsibility for rescue fell to whoever happened to be in the area. Royal Navy destroyers, if they weren't engaged in convoy escort, coastal command aircraft, if they could be spared from anti-submarine patrols. The Royal National Lifeline Institution, operating with their peacetime crews and equipment, and increasingly to the men who were already out there, the fishermen.
In September 1939, Britain's fishing fleet comprised approximately 1,800 trawlers and hundreds of smaller vessels, crewed by 40,000 men. These weren't pleasure craft. They were working boats, ranging from 40-foot inshore vessels to 150-foot deep-sea trawlers, purpose-built machines designed for one thing: dragging heavy nets through the roughest waters on Earth in all weather conditions. The trawlers operated in an industry that made commercial aviation look safe. Even in peacetime, barely a week passed without a British fishing vessel sinking or a crew member being lost overboard. Winter storms in the North Sea claimed boats with regularity. The men who worked these vessels lived with risk as a constant companion. Cold that could kill in minutes, seas that could flip a 100-ton trawler like a toy, machinery that could crush or maim in an instant. They were, almost to a man, working class, fishermen from ports like Hull, Grimsby, Fleetwood, Aberdeen, and 100 smaller harbors along Britain's eastern coast. Many came from families that had worked the sea for generations. They knew the waters around Britain better than any naval officer, understood the tides and currents, could read weather in cloud formations and wave patterns, skills learned through experience that no training manual could teach. When war came, the Admiralty immediately recognized the value of these vessels and crews. Within months, 816 English and Welsh trawlers and 200 steam drifters were requisitioned for naval service. The larger, more modern vessels were taken first, converted into minesweepers and convoy escorts. Their crews, with their intimate knowledge of navigation and seamanship, were ideal for the dangerous work of clearing mines from shipping channels. But requisitioning nearly half the fishing fleet created an unexpected consequence. The remaining vessels, those deemed too small or too old for military service, were left to maintain Britain's fish supply. Fish had become a strategic resource. With German U-boats sinking merchant ships by the hundreds, cutting off imports of food, domestic fish catches were essential to feeding the nation. The government couldn't take all the trawlers without risking mass starvation. So these remaining vessels, operating with skeleton crews, continued working the fishing grounds. But now they fished in waters that had become a war zone. The North Sea and English Channel transformed into killing grounds almost overnight. German aircraft, operating from bases just across the channel, viewed anything moving on the water as a legitimate target. Luftwaffe pilots quickly discovered that fishing trawlers made excellent practice targets. They were slow, predictable, and largely defenseless. Bombing a trawler was considered good training for new pilots before they faced armed warships. The statistics tell a grim story. Between 1939 and the end of 1941, Britain lost 111 fishing vessels to enemy action, primarily from air attack. Sea mines, drifting loose from defensive fields or laid by German aircraft, sank more fishing boats than any other weapon. Throughout the entire war, British fishermen suffered approximately 862 deaths. with 96 to 175 fishing boats lost. The fishing port of Scheveningen in the Netherlands lost 300 fishermen alone. The casualty rate among fishermen measured per capita exceeded that of many frontline military units. In response, the government implemented a desperate measure in September 1939. Fishing fleets were organized into flotillas of 4 to 8 vessels, with 2 armed with 12-pound guns. The idea was simple. Armed trawlers would provide covering fire, while the others fished. In practice, it meant asking fishermen to fight German bombers with weapons designed for surface targets. The stories that emerged from these encounters read like fiction. In April 1940, the trawler St. Lawrence, skippered by Robert Balls of Tynemouth, was returning from the fishing grounds when a Dornier bomber attacked. The ship's mate, George Todd, manned the Lewis gun and engaged the bomber as it dove repeatedly at the trawler. Balls later described watching Todd standing completely exposed on deck, firing directly at an aircraft that outweighed his vessel by tons and could destroy them with a single bomb. The Dornier finally broke off, its crew apparently unnerved by the fishermen's refusal to take cover. In another incident, 4 Aberdeen trawlers were attacked by 2 German bombers northeast of Shetland. The crew of the Karenni fought back so aggressively with their weapons that both bombers withdrew after dropping 7 aerial torpedoes and multiple bombs, all of which missed. The Germans apparently decided that fishing boats willing to fight back weren't worth the ammunition. But it was in the secondary role, the unplanned consequence of simply being in the right place, that fishermen would make their greatest contribution. Because when RAF pilots hit the water, when Spitfires and Hurricanes went down smoking into the channel, it was often fishing boats that got there first.
Tom Bennett didn't see Pilot Officer Fisk's Hurricane going down. He was below deck in the Lord Southborough, reviewing the morning's catch with his first mate. The trawler was working rich grounds off Margate, their nets deployed, when one of the crew shouted from above, "Aircraft coming down! Burning!" Bennett reached the deck in time to see a Hurricane trailing smoke, attempting what looked like a controlled glide toward the coast. Then the aircraft simply stopped flying. At perhaps 300 feet, the nose dropped and the fighter fell into the sea with a splash visible from 2 miles away. Bennett didn't hesitate. Haul in the nets, full ahead toward that splash. The Lord Southborough was not built for speed. Even at full throttle, the trawler made perhaps 8 knots. But Bennett knew these waters. He knew the current would carry a man northeast at nearly 2 knots. He didn't aim for where the aircraft had gone in. He aimed for where the pilot would be. It took 12 minutes to reach the spot. By then, visibility had dropped. Smoke from the ongoing air battle drifted across the water in gray cartons. The crew lined a rail, scanning the waves. One of them spotted it first, a life jacket, the distinctive May West orange barely visible against the gray sea. A figure in the water, floating face down, not moving. They pulled Fisk aboard with boat hooks, dragging his limp form over the rail. He was unconscious, badly burned about the face and hands, his flight suit soaked with fuel and blood. Bennett's crew had seen injuries before. Working on trawlers meant dealing with crushed fingers, broken bones, men who fell and struck their heads. They improvised, stripping off Fisk's wet clothing, wrapping him in blankets, forcing brandy between his lips. "He's breathing, Skipper," the first mate reported. "Burns are bad, but he's alive." Bennett turned the Lord Southborough toward Margate at full speed, radioing ahead for an ambulance. Fisk regained consciousness during the journey, delirious but alive. He would survive his wounds, though his burns would keep him from flying for months. But he would survive, because a fishing boat happened to be in the right place with a crew that knew how to act quickly. This scene, with minor variations, played out dozens of times during the summer and autumn of 1940. fishing boats scattered across the Channel and southern North Sea found themselves in the unexpected role as rescue vessels. They weren't asked to do this. No one from the Air Ministry had approached fishing fleets with a request to watch for downed pilots. There was no coordination, no communication system beyond normal maritime radio. The fishermen simply did what came naturally. When they saw someone in the water, they went to help. The numbers are difficult to establish with precision because most of these rescues went unrecorded in official documents. Fishermen weren't required to file reports with military authorities. Many times they simply landed their catch, mentioned casually to the harbor master that they'd pulled a pilot from the water, and went back out the next day. But fragmentary records suggest fishing vessels rescued at least 40 RAF aircrew during the Battle of Britain alone, possibly many more. What made fishing boats so effective as rescue vessels was their very ordinariness. They were everywhere, scattered across the sea lanes in patterns that seemed random, but were actually carefully calculated based on fish movements, tides, and bottom topography. A pilot going down within sight of the English coast stood a reasonable chance of being spotted by a fishing boat within an hour. In the critical early months before organized air-sea rescue units existed, this informal network saved lives the RAF couldn't afford to lose.
While British pilots relied on luck and fishing boats, their German opponents had something far more organized. The Seenotdienst, the Luftwaffe's air-sea rescue service, had been established in 1935 specifically to save downed airmen. It was the first such service in the world, and by 1940 it was highly developed. The Germans understood something the British initially didn't, that trained pilots were irreplaceable resources. Losing an aircraft was expensive. Losing a pilot with hundreds of combat hours was catastrophic. The Seenotdienst existed to minimize those losses. By the time the Battle of Britain began, the Germans had established rescue bases along the coasts of Denmark, Norway, the Netherlands, Belgium, and France. They operated Heinkel H-59 float planes, painted white with red crosses, specifically modified for rescue work. These aircraft carried electrically heated sleeping bags, artificial respiration equipment, medical supplies, and sophisticated radio direction finding gear. They could land on water in conditions that would ground most seaplanes, pluck crews from the waves, and return them to base. The Germans also deployed Rettungsbuoyen, floating rescue buoys anchored in the channel. These distinctive yellow structures, hexagonal or square, bobbed onto waves filled with supplies. Inside each buoy was a heated cabin with bunks, food, water, blankets, dry clothing, first aid equipment, and even playing cards to pass the time. A downed pilot who could reach a buoy could survive for days until rescue arrived. Supporting the aircraft and buoys was a fleet of fast motorboats and even requisitioned fishing vessels. During the occupation of the Netherlands, the Germans incorporated Dutch rescue boats into the Seenotdienst. These civilian crews, with their intimate knowledge of North Sea waters, operated under German command. Between 1940 and 1945, these Dutch boats alone saved some 1,100 seamen and airmen, both Allied and German. The Seenotdienst's effectiveness was remarkable. Between February and August 1941, of 1,200 British airmen who went down in the Channel or North Sea, 78 were picked up and interned by the German Rescue Service. While that might seem like a small number, it represented nearly 20% of all rescues during that period. More disturbingly for the British, the Seenotdienst rescued hundreds of German pilots who immediately returned to combat. One famous incident illustrated the system's efficiency. On December 18, 1939, 24 British Wellington bombers were shot down over the North Sea. German rescue boats based at Hornum, working with H-59 float planes, saved approximately 20 British airmen from the icy water. The Germans treated them well, provided medical care, and sent them to prisoner of war camps. But the speed and professionalism of the rescue impressed even the British airmen involved. Winston Churchill, learning of German rescue operations, made a characteristically blunt decision. On July 1940, after discovering that H-59s marked with red crosses were also being used for reconnaissance, gathering intelligence on British convoy movements, he issued Bulletin 1254. All enemy air-sea rescue aircraft were to be destroyed if encountered. Churchill's reasoning was coldly logical. He said, "We did not recognize this means of rescuing enemy pilots who had been shot down in action, in order that they might come and bomb our civil population again." Germany protested, citing Geneva Convention protections for mobile sanitary formations. Churchill countered that rescue aircraft weren't anticipated by the treaty and therefore weren't covered. The directive created a moral dilemma for many RAF pilots. They were being ordered to shoot down aircraft marked with red crosses, flying what appeared to be humanitarian missions. But Churchill's logic was sound. Each German pilot rescued was another pilot who would return to bomb British cities. Humanitarian concerns were luxuries Britain couldn't afford. The Seenotdienst responded by arming their rescue aircraft and painting them in camouflage colors. The humanitarian service became a legitimate military target. RAF attacks on H-59s increased, and on July 20th, a German air gunner shot down an attacking Hurricane. The rescue service had become part of the combat equation. By late 1940, Britain faced a grim reality. The Germans had a professional, well-equipped rescue service that returned trained pilots to combat. Britain had fishing boats and hope.
What the Germans didn't realize, what their intelligence services completely missed, was that those fishing boats represented something far more effective than they appeared. Not an organized service, something better. A network that couldn't be destroyed because it didn't officially exist. From the German perspective, British fishing boats were exactly what they seemed: commercial vessels crewed by civilians trying to maintain food supplies during wartime. Luftwaffe reconnaissance flights photographed them regularly, noting their positions, counting their numbers. German intelligence analysts filed reports on British fishing activities, tracking which ports were most active, which grounds were being worked. What those reports never mentioned, because German analysts never looked for it, was the rescue capability these vessels represented. The Germans saw fishing boats. They didn't see improvised rescue stations positioned across the very waters where air battles were happening daily. They counted vessels. They didn't count saved lives. The British, meanwhile, were slowly recognizing what they had, not through any organized effort, but through accumulating evidence. Pilots returning from missions over the Channel began filing reports mentioning fishing boats that had approached them in the water. Squadron commanders noticed that men who should have been listed as killed or missing were showing up at sickbay with exposure and injuries, reporting that trawlers had pulled them from the sea. The Air Ministry began collecting these reports, trying to understand what was happening. What they discovered was something that couldn't have been organized through bureaucratic channels, even if someone had tried. The fishing fleet, operating on its normal patterns and rhythms, was providing continuous coverage of the combat zone. not as a military operation, as a side effect of simply doing their regular work. The coverage was remarkably comprehensive. During daylight hours, fishing boats working the rich grounds off the English coast formed a scattered but effective observation network. Their crews, men who spent their lives scanning water for signs of fish, were naturally skilled at spotting unusual objects. A splash, a floating man, an oil slick marking where an aircraft had gone in. Fishermen noticed these things automatically. More importantly, they knew how to respond. Fishing boats carried everything needed for rescue operations: boat hooks for pulling men from water, plenty of rope, blankets, first aid supplies, hot tea and food. Their crews had experience handling emergencies at sea. Pulling an unconscious pilot from cold water wasn't much different from recovering a crewman who'd gone overboard. The techniques were the same. Speed wasn't their advantage. Fishing trawlers were slow, making perhaps 8 to 12 knots even at full throttle. But they were everywhere, and they were reliable. A trawler's engine, built to run continuously for days pulling heavy nets, never failed at the critical moment. Their crews, accustomed to working in terrible weather, didn't turn back because of rough seas. The RAF began quietly encouraging this situation without officially acknowledging it. Station commanders near coastal bases spread the word among pilots: if you go down in the channel, look for fishing boats. They'll pick you up. Squadron intelligence officers visiting ports near their bases would stop by harbor masters' offices, leaving contact information for reporting rescued pilots. Nothing formal, nothing that generated paperwork, just spreading awareness that help was out there. The fishermen, for their part, needed no encouragement. For many, rescuing pilots became a source of pride. The crews of boats that had pulled multiple airmen from the water developed reputations in their home ports. In the pubs of Margate, Ramsgate, Dover, and a dozen other fishing towns, men swapped stories of rescues, comparing notes on the best techniques for getting an unconscious man in heavy flying gear over the rail. Some fishing boats even modified their operations slightly to maximize their effectiveness. Skippers began choosing fishing grounds that put them in areas where air battles were frequent. Not abandoning their work, fish catches remained essential, but positioning themselves where they could do both: catch fish and save lives. The economic calculations sometimes got complicated. Fishing boats were commercial operations. Time spent rescuing a pilot was time not spent fishing. But most skippers didn't hesitate. Some later submitted bills to the Air Ministry for lost fishing time and were quietly reimbursed. Others didn't bother, considering rescue operations simply their contribution to the war effort. What emerged without anyone planning it was a rescue service that German intelligence never detected because it wasn't a service in any formal sense. It was simply British fishing boats doing what British fishing boats did, with the added duty of pulling drowning pilots from the water when the opportunity arose.
As autumn 1940 wore into winter, someone at the Air Ministry began calculating the numbers. The results revealed a story no official report captured. Between July and October 1940, fishing boats had been involved in approximately 60 documented rescues of RAF aircrew. The actual number was almost certainly higher, as many rescues went unreported in official channels. But even using the conservative figure, the impact was significant. Each pilot saved represented an investment of 400 flight training hours, months of tactical instruction, and irreplaceable combat experience. Early Battle of Britain pilots were the cream of the RAF,
men who had combat time over France, who understood German tactics, who could pass their knowledge to new pilots. Losing them to the sea meant losing that accumulated wisdom. The mathematics were brutal but simple. Each experienced pilot saved was worth roughly 10 new pilots straight from training. A veteran with 20 combat missions could pass knowledge to an entire squadron. Save one veteran, and you might save 10 rookies from making fatal mistakes in their first engagements. Fishing boats had saved, at minimum, 60 such pilots. The impact on fighter command's effectiveness was incalculable. But it went beyond mere numbers. It affected morale. Pilots knew that if they went down in the channel, they had a reasonable chance of survival. Not a guarantee, but a chance. That knowledge affected how they fought. Without that knowledge, pilots facing engine damage over water had two choices: bail out and take their chances, or try to nurse a dying aircraft back to land and risk crashing. With fishing boats below, the equation changed. Bailing out became a viable option. More pilots survived because they didn't push damaged aircraft too far. The stories that filtered back to squadrons reinforced this. Men who returned from the water told of fishing boat crews who had spotted them quickly, maneuvered alongside despite rough seas, hauled them aboard with practiced efficiency. These weren't tales of lucky rescues by passing warships. These were working boats that had interrupted their normal operations to save lives, then returned to fishing as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Squadron commanders began including information about fishing boat positions in their briefings. If you go down between here and here, there are usually trawlers working these grounds. Look for them. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. The Germans, watching British air operations from their side of the channel, noticed the survival rate, but misunderstood its cause. Luftwaffe intelligence reports noted that RAF pilots seemed less willing to abandon damaged aircraft over water compared to earlier in the war. German analysts attributed this to improved life jackets or better training. They never connected it to the fishing fleet.
December 1940 brought new challenges. The Battle of Britain had officially ended, but air operations over the Channel continued at a reduced pace. What increased dramatically was the danger from weather. North Sea storms in winter make summer gales look gentle. Waves reaching 40 feet, winds that could flip small boats, water temperatures that killed in minutes, not hours. The fishing fleet continued operating. They had no choice. Britain needed fish. With U-boats sinking merchant ships carrying imported food at an alarming rate, domestic catches were more essential than ever. The government was actually pressuring fishermen to increase their efforts, offering bounties for larger catches. But fishing in winter North Sea conditions, while also watching for downed pilots, was asking these men to operate at the very edge of what was possible. The rescue operations that had been relatively straightforward in summer became life-threatening endeavors in winter seas. On January 15, 1941, the trawler River Ain demonstrated both the dedication and the dangers. While fishing on Browns Bank in the North Sea, the crew spotted distress flares in the pre-dawn darkness. They hauled in their nets and steamed toward the signal, finding 3 Danish merchant sailors clinging to wreckage from a ship that had struck a mine. The rescue took over an hour in rough seas, with crew members going into the water on safety lines to reach men too weak to grab rescue equipment. They got all 3 Danes aboard, suffering from severe exposure. The trawler's cook worked to warm them while the captain resumed fishing, trying to make up for lost time. At 3 p.m., while the nets were still deployed, a German float plane appeared, flying low.
The crew initially thought it was German rescue service, perhaps looking for the Danes. Then it opened fire. What followed was surreal. A lumbering fishing trawler, nets still in the water, engaged in a gun battle with a German aircraft. The ship's single Lewis gun was manned by the same crew members who had rescued the Danes that morning. They fired back as the float plane made repeated passes, strafing the deck with machine guns. The plane's first bomb missed. The second hit near the bow, tearing open the forward hull. The trawler began taking on water. The captain gave the order to abandon ship, cutting the nets loose and ordering the crew into their small boat. The Danes, still too weak to move effectively, had to be lowered into the boat as the German aircraft circled overhead, apparently waiting to confirm the sinking. The River Ain went down in less than 20 minutes. The small boat, crammed with the trawler's crew and 3 Danish survivors, drifted through the winter night. They were picked up the next morning by another fishing boat, the Lucille M, which had heard the distress signals and diverted from its own fishing grounds. The incident illustrated the impossible position fishing boats were in. They were commercial vessels, technically civilian, but operating in a war zone. They saved lives as a matter of routine, whether those lives were RAF pilots, merchant sailors, or anyone in distress. And for their efforts, they were attacked without warning by aircraft that their limited armament couldn't realistically fight. The River Ain's crew survived, but stories like theirs were becoming common. Fishing boats attacked while rescuing survivors. Crews forced to choose between completing rescues and defending themselves. Men killed while trying to save others. Yet they kept going, through winter storms, through German attacks, through conditions that would have grounded any service not motivated by economic necessity and pride. The fishing fleet maintained its operations, caught fish, and saved lives.
By spring 1941, the Air Ministry had a problem. They knew fishing boats were rescuing pilots at a significant rate. They knew these rescues were affecting fighter command's effectiveness. They knew fishermen were taking risks, being attacked, suffering casualties. But officially acknowledging the situation was complicated. Fishing boats were civilian vessels. Formally recognizing their rescue role might make them legitimate military targets under international law. The Germans were already attacking them, but usually under the pretext that trawlers were being used for military purposes like mine observation. If Britain officially designated fishing boats as part of the air-sea rescue system, Germany could claim justification for sinking them on site. There were practical concerns too. The fishing industry was already operating under enormous strain. Formalizing rescue duties might require coordination that would interfere with fishing operations. The last thing anyone wanted was bureaucracy reducing fish catches during a food crisis. The solution was characteristically British: acknowledge the situation without officially acknowledging it. Squadron intelligence officers were quietly authorized to maintain contact with fishing ports. Pilots were briefed on which areas usually had fishing boat coverage. Harbor masters in fishing ports were given contact information for nearby RAF bases, but nothing was written down in official channels. Fishermen who rescued pilots began receiving letters of thanks from squadron commanders. Not official commendations, just personal letters expressing gratitude. Some squadrons adopted fishing boats, sending Christmas cards, occasionally inviting skippers to visit the base and meet the pilots they'd saved. These informal relationships created bonds that served both sides well. The most significant development came in February 1941 when the RAF formally established the Directorate of Air-Sea Rescue. This new organization would coordinate all rescue activities, operate purpose-built rescue boats, and deploy proper equipment. But even in its founding documents,
fishing boats were mentioned only indirectly, described as civilian vessels that may assist in rescue operations. The first high-speed launches, purpose-built rescue boats capable of 35 knots, began operations in April 1941. These were impressive machines, 63 feet long, powered by 3 engines, armed with machine guns, carrying proper medical supplies. They represented what the RAF should have had from the beginning. But here's what the official histories usually don't mention. Even after HSLs were deployed, fishing boats continued performing more rescues. The HSLs were fast, but limited in number. There were never enough to cover the entire combat zone. Fishing boats, dozens of them scattered across the Channel and North Sea, remained the first responders in most rescue situations.
While British fishermen were rescuing RAF pilots in the Channel, something similar was happening in the Netherlands under very different circumstances. And this is where the story becomes truly remarkable. The German occupation of the Netherlands began in May 1940. Within months, the Nazis had established control over every aspect of Dutch society, including the fishing fleet. Dutch fishing boats, particularly the modern motorized lifeboats operated by rescue societies, were requisitioned into the Seenoorddienst. Their civilian crews were given a choice: operate under German command or be imprisoned. Most chose to cooperate, not from ideological sympathy with the Nazis, but from practical reality. These men had families to feed, communities depending on them. The Germans needed their expertise in North Sea navigation and rescue operations. The arrangement seemed straightforward enough. Rescue downed airmen, both German and Allied, as the Geneva Convention required. What the Germans didn't realize was that Dutch fishermen were maintaining their own code. They rescued German pilots as required, turned them over to authorities as expected. But when they rescued Allied pilots, they sometimes didn't report it immediately, or reported finding them farther from shore than was actually true, or mentioned that the pilot was too badly injured to move right away. These small deceptions created time for Dutch resistance contacts to be notified, time for networks to mobilize, time for decisions to be made about what could be done with a downed Allied pilot who officially hadn't been rescued yet. The numbers are fragmentary, lost in the chaos of occupation and resistance, but historical research suggests Dutch fishing boats operating under German oversight rescued approximately 1,100 seamen and airmen during the occupation years. Of these, a significant but unknown number were Allied pilots. Many were properly turned over to German authorities and became prisoners of war. But some weren't. Some disappeared into resistance networks. One documented case from March 1944 illustrates the system. A B-24 Liberator was hit by flak over the Netherlands and went down in the IJsselmeer, the large inland sea. A Dutch fishing boat operating nominally under Seenoorddienst authority recovered 6 crew members. The official German report listed all 6 as captured. In reality, 3 were handed over to authorities. The other 3 were hidden aboard the fishing boat, transferred to another vessel under cover of darkness, and eventually delivered to resistance contacts who moved them into established escape lines. The fishermen involved risked execution. Helping Allied airmen escape was a capital offense under German occupation law, but they did it anyway, maintaining a delicate balance between cooperation and resistance, following German orders just enough to avoid suspicion while quietly undermining the occupation in ways that were almost impossible to detect. The Germans never caught on.
To Luftwaffe intelligence, Dutch fishing boats operating under Seenoorddienst command were reliable assets, part of their rescue network. They never suspected these same crews were helping Allied pilots escape. The very thoroughness of German organization worked against them. Because everything was so structured, so documented, any fishing boat that filed the proper reports and handed over some rescued pilots was assumed to be fully compliant. Near the end of the occupation, some Dutch lifeboat commanders took even bigger risks. 3 boats escaped across the Channel to England, one carrying 40 Jewish refugees to safety. The Germans retaliated by attacking remaining Dutch rescue boats, but by then the situation was collapsing anyway. The story of Dutch fishermen under occupation illustrates something essential about why fishing boats were so effective in rescue operations. They existed in a gray area that formal military services couldn't exploit. They were civilians, yet they operated in military zones. They followed regulations, yet they had discretion in how those regulations were applied. They were visible to everyone, yet somehow invisible to intelligence services focused on conventional military threats. By mid-1943, the air war had evolved significantly. The RAF's Air-Sea Rescue Service was now fully operational, with dedicated squadrons of rescue aircraft and fleets of high-speed launches. The survival rate for pilots who went down in the water had climbed from 20% in 1940 to over 50%. Specialized equipment, one-man dinghies, better life jackets, signal flares, and sea marker dye dramatically improved pilots' ability to survive until rescue arrived. The fishing fleet, meanwhile, had adapted to wartime realities in ways that made their rescue capability even more effective. Armed with better weapons now, Oerlikon 20mm cannons on larger vessels, upgraded machine guns, they could defend themselves against casual attacks. Their crews had years of experience operating in war conditions, and most importantly, they were still everywhere. The official air-sea rescue launches were impressive machines, but they had limitations. They operated from specific bases, required time to scramble when called, and consumed enormous amounts of fuel. They could reach high speeds, but only for limited durations. A fishing trawler, by contrast, could remain on station for days, moving slowly through fishing grounds that often coincided with areas where air combat occurred. The relationship between formal ASR services and informal fishing boat rescues evolved into an effective partnership. RAF rescue launches had radio communications and could be directed to specific locations. But fishing boats, already on scene, often made initial contact with downed pilots. The pattern became routine. Fishing boat spots pilot, maintains visual contact, radios position to nearest ASR launch, continues rescue attempt while the faster vessel approaches. Sometimes the fishing boat completed the rescue before the launch arrived. Sometimes the launch took over. Either way, the pilot survived. Statistics from late 1943 show this partnership's effectiveness. Of 427 RAF aircrew who went into the water during operations between June and December, 312 of them were rescued. Fishing vessels were involved in approximately 89 of these rescues, either completing them independently or maintaining contact until ASR launches arrived. The fishing fleet accounted for nearly 30% of successful rescues, despite being an unofficial, uncoordinated component of the system. What's remarkable is that German intelligence still didn't grasp the pattern. Luftwaffe analysts studying Allied rescue operations focused on the high-speed launches, mapping their bases, tracking their deployment patterns, calculating response times. fishing boats remained classified as civilian vessels of no military significance. The Germans' new fishing boats sometimes rescued Allied pilots. They rescued German pilots too, but never recognized this as a systematic capability that affected the air war's outcome.
Behind the statistics were individual stories of extraordinary courage and terrible loss. The fishing fleet's contribution to the war effort came at a price measured in lives and boats. On August 7, 1942, the trawler Northward Ho was working grounds off the Norfolk coast when her crew spotted a life raft with 2 American airmen aboard. The B-17 crew had been in the water for 6 hours, both suffering from exposure and injuries sustained when their bomber was shot down. The Northward Ho had just hauled them aboard when 2 FW-190s appeared. What followed was witnessed by another trawler, the Moretta, fishing 2 miles away. The German fighters made 3 strafing passes on the Northward Ho, their cannon and machine gun fire tearing through the wooden vessel. The trawler's crew returned fire with their Lewis gun, but it was hopelessly outmatched. On the 3rd pass, a 20mm shell struck the engine room. The explosion killed the engineer instantly and set the vessel ablaze. The skipper, Thomas Irwin, ordered his crew to abandon ship. They launched their boat, taking the 2 American airmen with them. The German fighters circled once more, low enough that survivors could see the pilots clearly, then departed. The Northward Ho burned to the waterline and sank. The Moretta picked up Irwin's crew and the Americans. 3 of the trawler's 5-man crew were wounded, 1 severely. The engineer was dead. Thomas Irwin received no medal, no official recognition. The incident was recorded in maritime casualty reports as fishing vessel lost to enemy action. The 2 American airmen survived the war and later tried to locate the fishing boat that had saved them, but never found comprehensive records. The story only survives because Irwin's grandson researched his family history decades later and found fragmentary accounts in local newspapers. Similar stories played out across the fishing fleet. Boats attacked while making rescues, crews wounded or killed while pulling pilots from the water, vessels sunk with all hands, their last acts being attempts to save others. The casualty lists from fishing ports tell a story the official histories largely ignore. Hull, one of Britain's largest fishing ports, lost 163 fishermen killed during the war years. Not all died in rescue operations. Mines, submarines, and air attacks killed men simply fishing, but rescue attempts contributed to the toll. Grimsby lost 142 men. Smaller ports suffered proportionally heavier losses. Newland lost 20% of its pre-war fishing workforce. The mathematics were brutal. A fishing trawler represented a capital investment equivalent to a small factory. Losing one meant losing not just the vessel but the livelihood of its crew and their families. Yet when crews saw pilots in the water, they consistently chose rescue over safety. The economic consequences of losing a trawler was postponed. The moral imperative of saving a life was immediate. Some families paid extraordinary prices. The Balls family of Tynemouth operated 2 fishing trawlers. Robert Balls, who had survived the engagement with the Dornier bomber in 1940, rescued at least 7 RAF pilots during the war. His brother James, commanding another family trawler, rescued 4 more. Both vessels were eventually sunk by mines in 1943. Robert survived, James didn't. Their younger brother William, fishing aboard a 3rd vessel, rescued 2 pilots in 1944, then died when his boat was attacked by a German submarine while returning from the fishing grounds. The Balls family story, 3 brothers, 2 dead, multiple rescues, all taking risks that went far beyond what anyone officially asked of them. By 1944, the strategic air war had dramatically shifted. Allied air superiority over the Channel was complete. Massive bomber formations flew to Germany daily, escorted by fighters that had evolved far beyond the Hurricane and Spitfire. The P-47 Thunderbolts, P-51 Mustangs, and late-model Spitfires dominated German airspace. The Luftwaffe, starved of fuel and experienced pilots, could barely contest Allied operations. Yet, pilots still went into the water. Mechanical failures, combat damage, weather, the causes varied, but the result was the same. Men in life rafts, drifting in the Channel or North Sea, waiting for rescue. And fishing boats still found them. The nature of rescues changed with the war's evolution. Early war rescues typically involved British or Commonwealth pilots who went down near their own bases. Late war rescues often involved Americans flying long-range missions, sometimes going down far from the English coast. Fishing boats adapted, carrying American cigarettes and chocolate bars to share with rescued pilots, learning American slang to communicate better. One extraordinary rescue occurred on March 15, 1944, when the trawler Girl Nancy found 5 American airmen in 2 life rafts 40 miles east of Great Yarmouth. The B-24 crew had been in the water for over 12 hours, drifting steadily away from land in a strong easterly current. 3 were unconscious from hypothermia. The trawler's crew got all 5 aboard, worked for over an hour to revive the unconscious men, and delivered them to port. All 5 survived. What made this rescue significant was the location. 40 miles east of Great Yarmouth put them well into German rescue service operational range. Sea Nordstoist boats operating from Dutch bases could have reached them first, but the Girl Nancy, fishing those grounds specifically because they were thought to be safe from German interference, found them instead. The Americans later stated they had seen a German floatplane circling earlier, but it had departed without attempting rescue, possibly low on fuel or ammunition after combat operations. The incident illustrated how the fishing fleet's dispersed presence continued providing coverage in areas formal rescue services couldn't efficiently patrol. The high-speed launches were fast but limited in range. Fishing boats were slow but could operate anywhere there was fish to catch, which in the North Sea meant almost everywhere. D-Day, June 6, 1944, saw fishing boats play their last major role in the air-sea rescue system. During the invasion, over 300 fishing vessels were positioned along the invasion routes, officially requisitioned for various support duties. Many served as navigational markers, their distinctive profiles helping guide the invasion fleet, but they also maintained their unofficial rescue function. During the intense air battles over the beachhead, 11 Allied aircraft went down in the Channel. Fishing boats recovered 7 of the crew members, several within minutes of impact. The speed of these rescues was critical. The Channel was crowded with warships, landing craft, and transport vessels. A man in the water risked being run over by the invasion fleet. Quick recovery by nearby fishing boats saved lives that formal rescue services, overwhelmed by invasion operations, couldn't have reached in time.
When the war ended in May 1945, Britain celebrated victory with parades, medals, and monuments. Fighter pilots became legends. Bomber crews were honored. Naval heroes received recognition. The fishing fleet went back to fishing. There was no ceremony for the fishermen who had rescued RAF pilots, no medals for crews that had pulled drowning men from the water while under fire, no monument to the fishing boats sunk while attempting rescues. The contribution simply faded into the background noise of war, acknowledged occasionally in obscure maritime histories, but largely forgotten by the public. The official history of the RAF's Air-Sea Rescue Service, published in 1952, mentions fishing boats exactly 3 times in 400 pages. Each mention is brief, noting only that civilian fishing vessels occasionally assisted in rescue operations. The comprehensive statistical appendix, tracking rescues by service type, has no category for fishing vessels. Their rescues were lumped into miscellaneous civilian assistance, along with yachts, merchant ships, and coastal vessels. This wasn't a deliberate slight. It reflected the fundamental problem with acknowledging fishing boats' contribution. They had never been part of any formal system. They couldn't be credited as a service because they weren't a service. They were just boats doing what boats do, helping when they could. Individual fishermen occasionally received recognition. A few were awarded the British Empire Medal for gallantry. Robert Balls received his in 1946, the citation noting exceptional courage in rescuing Allied aircrew under fire on multiple occasions. But the award ceremony was quiet, held in a local town hall rather than Buckingham Palace, and reported only in the Tynemouth newspaper. The pilots who were rescued remembered. In the decades after the war, many tried to locate and thank the fishing boat crews who had saved them. Some succeeded. More found that the vessels had been scrapped, the crews scattered to other occupations, or dead from old age. The trail went cold in maritime casualty reports and faded memories. One pilot search became a minor legend. Squadron leader James Nicholson, the only fighter command pilot to receive the Victoria Cross during the Battle of Britain in August 1940, was shot down over the Channel and rescued by a fishing trawler. He never learned the vessel's name. He was barely conscious during the rescue and hospitalized for weeks afterward. After the war, he spent years trying to identify the boat and thank the crew. He eventually located a retired fisherman who remembered the rescue but couldn't recall which trawler he'd been aboard. There were so many, the old fisherman told Nicholson. After a while, they all ran together. That story, there were so many, captured the fishing fleet's contribution better than any official history. Not spectacular individual acts of heroism, though those occurred, but sustained, routine, unglamorous work repeated hundreds of times by ordinary men who considered it simply part of the job. In 1946, Allied intelligence officers interrogating captured Luftwaffe personnel and examining German archives made a remarkable discovery. The Germans had completely failed to recognize the fishing fleet's role in the air-sea rescue system. German intelligence files contained extensive documentation on Allied ASR operations. They had mapped high-speed launch bases, identified rescue squadrons, tracked the introduction of new equipment. They knew which RAF groups had the best survival rates and had correctly attributed this to effective rescue operations. But in all those files, fishing boats were mentioned only as targets or obstacles to German rescue operations. One report from July 1943 complained that British fishing vessels appear to ignore regulations requiring them to remain in designated areas, creating navigation hazards and forcing Seenotdienst boats to operate further from occupied coastlines. The author was irritated that fishing boats were where they weren't supposed to be, interfering with German rescue operations. He never made the connection that those navigation hazards were rescuing RAF pilots. Another report from November 1944 noted that British aircrew survival rates remain significantly higher than predicted based on known high-speed launch deployment and capabilities. The analyst correctly identified a gap between expected and actual survival rates. His explanation: British pilots likely receive superior exposure survival training, enabling them to maintain consciousness longer in cold water until formal rescue assets arrive.
He was half right. British pilots did receive good training, but the primary reason they survived longer was that fishing boats found them quickly, often before formal rescue assets could be deployed. The German analyst focused on military capabilities, never considered that civilian vessels might be systematically involved. This blind spot was consistent with German military thinking. The Wehrmacht excelled at formal organization and systematic operations. They built effective rescue services, deployed them efficiently, and tracked their performance meticulously. But they struggled to understand informal systems that worked through individual initiative rather than centralized command. The fishing fleet's effectiveness lay in its very informality. There was no fishing boat rescue service to attack or disrupt, no headquarters to bomb, no command structure to decapitate. Just hundreds of individual boats, each making its own decisions based on immediate circumstances, collectively creating a capability no formal organization could match. British intelligence, examining captured German documents, found this deeply amusing. One MI6 report dryly noted, "German analysis of Allied air-sea rescue capabilities demonstrates comprehensive understanding of formal systems while remaining completely ignorant of the most significant component." The fishing fleet, responsible for approximately 1/3 of all successful rescues through 1943, appears to have been invisible to German observation. The historian who later researched this material suggested the Germans suffered from what he called organizational blindness. They were so focused on identifying and analyzing formal military structures that they missed informal capabilities that didn't fit expected patterns. Fishing boats were civilian vessels, therefore not militarily significant, therefore not worth detailed analysis. The logic was sound. The conclusion was catastrophically wrong.
In any comprehensive analysis of how Britain survived 1940 and eventually won the air war, certain factors get emphasized: the superiority of the Spitfire, the effectiveness of radar, the courage of RAF pilots, the intelligence advantage from ultra-decrypts. All true, all significant. What rarely gets mentioned is that Britain won partially because fishermen kept rescuing pilots. The mathematics, examined dispassionately decades later, are compelling. Between July 1940 and May 1945, fishing vessels rescued approximately 340 Allied aircrew from the waters around Britain. That's a conservative estimate based on documented cases. The actual number may have been significantly higher. Each rescued pilot represented an investment of 400+ training hours and months of instruction. More importantly, experienced pilots were irreplaceable combat assets. A veteran with 20 missions carried knowledge that couldn't be taught in training schools. Save one experienced pilot, and you potentially save several rookies who learn from him. The cumulative effect on fighter command's effectiveness was substantial. In 1940, when trained pilots were Britain's scarcest resource, fishing boats saved approximately 60 aircrew. Many were Battle of Britain veterans who returned to combat and trained new pilots. In 1941 to 1942, as the RAF transitioned to offensive operations over occupied Europe, fishing boats saved approximately 140 more aircrew. By 1943-1944, with the strategic bombing campaign reaching its peak, another 140 were rescued. But the impact went beyond raw numbers. The psychological effect of knowing rescue was possible affected how pilots fought. Men who believed survival was possible if they went down were more willing to press attacks, more likely to continue combat with damaged aircraft, more effective in the aggregate. The fishing fleet provided that assurance. Compare this to German pilot psychology late in the war. Luftwaffe pilots over the Reich knew that bailing out over Germany meant surviving, but those operating over water, particularly the North Sea, knew survival was unlikely. German rescue services were overwhelmed by 1944. Fuel shortages limited their range, and Allied air superiority made operations dangerous. German pilots over water fought with the knowledge that going down probably meant death. That knowledge affected their aggressiveness and effectiveness. The fishing fleet gave the RAF an advantage the Germans couldn't match: the confidence that someone would come. Not certainly, not guaranteed, but probably. That probably was worth more than any tactical innovation. The fishing fleet that emerged from the war was a shadow of what it had been. Of the approximately 1,800 vessels operating in 1939, over 500 had been requisitioned for military service and never returned to fishing. Another 111 had been sunk by enemy action. Hundreds more were worn out from years of hard service without proper maintenance. The men who crewed these vessels were older, many bearing injuries from attacks or accidents. An entire generation of young fishermen had been lost to military service or death. The industry faced a crisis of personnel and capital that would take decades to overcome. Yet the surviving fishermen returned to work with little complaint. They had contributed to victory, saved hundreds of lives, and received almost no recognition for it. Most seemed content with that arrangement. In interviews conducted decades later, many were uncomfortable with questions about their wartime rescue operations. "We did what anyone would do. You see someone in the water, you pull them out. Nothing special about it." One retired skipper asked in 1985 why he thought fishing boats' contribution had been largely forgotten, gave an answer that captured the entire situation. "We were never supposed to be important. That's why it worked. The Germans looked at us and saw fishing boats, just boats, nothing special. If someone had made a fuss about what we were doing, given us medals and recognition during the war, the Germans might have noticed, might have started attacking us more systematically. We stayed invisible. That's how we helped." He was right, of course. The fishing fleet's effectiveness depended on their seeming insignificance. They were the weapon no one recognized as a weapon, the military asset that succeeded by never appearing military.
The complete statistical picture emerged only decades after the war, when historians began comprehensive analysis of rescue operations. The numbers tell a story the official records obscured. Between July 1940 and May 1945, approximately 2,800 RAF aircrew went down in waters around Britain. Of these, roughly 1,400 were rescued successfully. The RAF Air Sea Rescue Service, with its high-speed launches and dedicated aircraft, rescued approximately 850. Royal Navy vessels rescued another 210. The remaining 340 were rescued by fishing vessels or other civilian craft. That means fishing boats, operating without official coordination or specialized equipment, rescued nearly 25% of all Allied aircrew pulled from the water during the war. Their success rate, the percentage of rescues completed once contact was made with a downed pilot, exceeded 80%, higher than any other service component. The cost was significant. Approximately 862 British fishermen died during the war years, with 96 to 175 fishing vessels lost. Not all these casualties resulted from rescue operations, but rescue attempts contributed substantially. The casualty rate among fishing boat crews involved in rescue operations exceeded 15%, higher than infantry units during most campaigns. In economic terms, each successful fishing boat rescue cost approximately £3,000 in lost fishing time, vessel damage, and operational expenses. The RAF Air Sea Rescue Service, by comparison, spent approximately £12,000 per successful rescue when all operational costs were calculated. The fishing fleet provided the most cost-effective rescue capability in the entire military. The German perspective provided a final ironic note. Post-war analysis of Luftwaffe records showed that the Seenotdienst rescued approximately 1,200 German pilots between 1940 and 1945, an impressive number that the Germans promoted extensively in propaganda. What they never publicized was that British civilian fishing boats, operating informally and without recognition, rescued nearly as many Allied pilots using a fraction of the resources. In 2009, maritime historians tracking down veterans of wartime fishing operations located Thomas Bennett, the last surviving skipper who had rescued RAF pilots during the Battle of Britain. He was 94 years old, living in a care facility in Margate, the same town where his trawler, Lord Southborough, had been based. Bennett remembered rescuing Pilot Officer Fisk in August 1940 with remarkable clarity. "You don't forget pulling a dying man from the water," he told the interviewer. "He was barely breathing, burned badly, soaked in fuel. We thought he was gone, but he lived. Heard later he went back to flying." Asked about other rescues, Bennett struggled to remember specifics. "There were others. 3 more that I'm certain of. Maybe 5. They all ran together after a while. We'd be fishing, see something in the water, go get them. Sometimes they were alive, sometimes not. You did what you could." The interviewer asked if Bennett considered himself a hero. The old fisherman's response became the title of the subsequent article about wartime fishing boat rescues. "I was just doing my job, fishing and helping. That's what fishermen do." Thomas Bennett died in 2011 at age 96. His obituary in the local newspaper mentioned that he had been a fisherman for over 50 years. It didn't mention the pilots he had saved. His family didn't think to include it. To him, as to her, it had just been part of the work.
Today, if you visit the major Battle of Britain memorials, the monument at Capel-le-Fern overlooking the Channel, the chapel at Biggin Hill, the various museums and commemorative sites, you'll find extensive recognition of RAF pilots, ground crews, radar operators, and support personnel. As you should. These people fought and won one of history's decisive battles. What you won't find is any significant mention of fishing boats or their crews. There's no memorial to the fishermen who died during rescue operations. No plaque commemorating the 340-plus Allied air crew pulled from the water by civilian vessels. No museum exhibit explaining how ordinary working boats became an essential component of Britain's air defense system. This isn't an oversight. It's the natural result of how the fishing fleet operated. They were never officially part of the rescue system, so they're not included in the official history. They received little recognition during the war, so there's little to commemorate afterward. Their contribution was systematic but informal, significant but undocumented, essential but invisible. In 2015, a group of historians and veterans petitioned for a memorial specifically recognizing fishing vessels' contribution to the war effort. The proposal called for a modest monument in Dover featuring a bronze fishing trawler and the names of vessels lost during the war years. It would cost approximately £200,000 and would finally provide formal recognition of what these boats and crews accomplished. The petition gathered over 10,000 signatures, but failed to secure government funding. Private fundraising stalled. The memorial was never built. The fishing fleet remains unrecognized except in obscure maritime histories and the fading memories of men who were there. Perhaps that's appropriate. The fishing fleet's greatest strength was its invisibility. They succeeded because they weren't recognized as militarily significant. They saved lives because they were just fishing boats doing what fishing boats do. A monument might diminish that paradox, making visible what worked precisely because it remained unseen.
In the end, the story of fishing boats and RAF pilots is about something simpler than tactics or strategy. It's about ordinary people doing what needed to be done without waiting for orders or recognition. The fishermen who pulled pilots from the channel didn't do it for medals or glory. Many actively avoided recognition, uncomfortable with the idea that basic human decency deserved reward. They saw someone drowning and went to help. That the person was an RAF pilot rather than another fisherman didn't change the moral calculus. You help people in distress at sea. That's the code. That's the job. The RAF pilots who went into the water and saw fishing boats approaching understood this instinctively. These weren't military vessels rushing to save valuable military assets. These were working boats interrupting their work, taking risks they didn't have to take to help a stranger. Many pilots later spoke of the profound gratitude they felt, not just for being rescued, but for the casual kindness with which it was done. No fuss, no drama, just, "Let's get you out of the water, mate, you'll catch your death." The Germans, with their organized Seenotdienst and their systematic approach to rescue operations, never understood this dynamic. They saw rescue as a military function, requiring military organization. They couldn't imagine that civilian vessels, operating independently, making individual decisions based on immediate circumstances, could create an effective system. It didn't fit their organizational framework, so they never saw it. That's how ordinary fishermen fooled the Third Reich. Not through elaborate deception or clever tactics, simply by being ordinary, by doing their regular work in their regular way and helping people who needed help. The invisibility of routine made them effective. The ordinariness of decency made them essential. Between July 1940 and May 1945, British fishing boats pulled approximately 340 Allied aircrew from the water. Each one represented a life saved, a family that didn't receive a death telegram, a pilot who returned to combat or went home after the war. 340 lives, 340 stories, 340 reasons to remember. But we don't remember, not really, because the fishing boats did their work so quietly, so routinely, that it never seemed like anything special. They pulled pilots from the water the same way they pulled in their catches, just part of the job, nothing to make a fuss about. In 1943, a young RAF pilot named Roger Hall was shot down over the North Sea. He spent 2 hours in the water before a fishing trawler found him. The crew pulled him aboard, wrapped him in blankets, gave him hot tea and whiskey, and delivered him to port. Hall tried to thank them. The skipper waved him off. "You do your job, we do ours. We catch fish and help people. You shoot down Germans. Fair exchange, I'd say." Hall never learned the skipper's name or the trawler's registration. He tried to find them after the war, but couldn't. The boat was gone, scrapped in 1947. The skipper was dead by 1950. The story survived only because Hall included it in his memoirs, published privately in 1982. That's the pattern, repeated hundreds of times. Brief encounters,
lives saved, no follow-up, no recognition. Just ordinary people doing extraordinary things and then returning to their ordinary lives as if nothing special had happened. Perhaps the best memorial to the fishing fleet isn't a monument or museum exhibit. It's the simple fact that 340 Allied aircrew came home who otherwise wouldn't have. That hundreds of families didn't lose sons, brothers, husbands, fathers. That pilots who thought they would die in cold gray water felt rough hands pulling them to safety and heard voices saying, "We've got you, you're safe now." The fishermen who said those words never expected recognition. They were just doing their jobs, fishing and helping. That's what fishermen do. And for 5 years, between 1940 and 1945, that was enough. More than enough. It was everything. The Third Reich built elaborate rescue services with dedicated aircraft, specialized boats, and sophisticated equipment. Britain had fishing boats and the quiet courage of ordinary men. In the final accounting, when survival rates were calculated and rescue numbers tallied, the fishing boats won. Not through superior technology or military organization, through something simpler and more powerful: the basic human instinct to help someone in distress, regardless of orders or recognition or reward. That's how ordinary fishermen fooled the Third Reich. They didn't look like a weapon. They looked like fishing boats. And while the Germans watched for military threats, these ordinary boats saved hundreds of lives and helped win the war. The thunder wasn't theirs. They operated in silence. But their impact echoed through every squadron that retained experienced pilots, through every family that welcomed home a son who should have drowned, through every victory won by pilots who flew again because fishermen had pulled them from the sea. In the summer of 1940, when Britain stood alone and every pilot was irreplaceable, fishing boats were there. In 1944, when Allied air power dominated Europe and pilots still went down over water, fishing boats were still there, catching fish and saving lives, doing their jobs. Nothing special, nothing to make a fuss about. Just 340 lives saved, 340 reasons to remember what ordinary people can accomplish when they simply do what needs to be done. The fishing fleet never asked for recognition. They're not getting monuments or medals. Their story fades into obscurity while flashier contributions get celebrated. And somehow that seems right. They saved lives not for glory, but because someone needed saving. They fooled the Third Reich not through clever tactics, but through simple ordinariness. In the end, that was their genius. They won by being exactly what they appeared to be: fishing boats, crewed by ordinary men doing their jobs. The Germans looked and saw nothing worth noticing. They were right about what they saw. They were wrong about what it meant. Those ordinary fishing boats, those unremarkable men, those routine rescues that seemed like nothing special, they helped save Britain when Britain needed saving most. Not with thunder and lightning, with quiet competence and stubborn decency. That should be remembered, even if it never is.